Good morning, and thank you for coming to the Finance Committee meeting of the board. We are currently using Zoom and recording this meeting because of the COVID-19 pandemic and Governor Wolf's mandate to close all schools. So I will hand it over to Megan Schaefer. And again, we're recording this meeting. Anyone who has questions or comments can hold their thoughts until the end of the presentation. Thank you.
Suba, George Fraser is going to first present the information technology budget first.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that. Thank you.
Okay, can you see my slides?
Yes.
Terrific. Let's not put that there. Okay, so good morning and welcome. I'm going to go through the information department proposed budget for next year. Just a quick orientation to the slide deck. The first 10 slides are fundamentally about the department. It's a snapshot of the department. And then the following slides are next year's proposed budget. Jumping in. This is the organizational chart for the information systems department. And there's 21 of us total, including administrative assistants. And you can see there at the bottom of the slide our salaries, benefits, and other personnel costs. This is a snapshot of the equipment that we support. On the left-hand side, that left-hand column represents all the equipment that is connected to our network. If you were to add that up, you'd find that we have over 15,000 devices now connected to our network. We are fundamentally the size of a medium-sized enterprise. Just in terms of keeping a perspective on how large the organization is, we are the equivalent of a medium-sized enterprise. On the right-hand side, there are other devices and services and programs. A lot of those devices there are not connected to the network, but they're equipment that we still support, as well as other applications and devices. And you can see the growing number of applications that are used throughout the district for a variety of purposes. Continuing on, we continue to see an increase in Chromebooks. The Chromebooks continue to grow. We saw an increase of 700 Chromebooks from last year to this year. And the use of MacBooks continues a steady decline. So we're seeing a larger number of Chromebooks growing in both the middle schools and the upper elementary grade levels. Continuing a snapshot of the department, this is a snapshot of help desk tickets from the last 3 years. You can see to date this year, we're at 12,000, so April 22nd. We've already surpassed the number of tickets that we had total in the 2 previous years. And also, I'd like to point out that this year we've also generated close to just around 650 tickets for purchasing equipment. This is a visual of the tickets. It's very telling. That first peak on the left over September is the beginning of the school year, and that's pretty traditional. We see that peak every year. To the right of that second peak, however, is since March 13th, or the first day of distance learning, work from home, whatever you want to call that. So we're actually seeing more tickets now than we do at the beginning of the year. Normally at the beginning of the year, we hover around 80 tickets per business day. As of this data, which is from the 24th, we're averaging around 94 tickets per day. So we're actually seeing more work now than we would normally at the beginning of the year, which is very, very busy time of the year. Continuing on with that snapshot, this is a snapshot of equipment that we've actually repaired. So in some way it was either damaged or failed. Maybe a hard drive failed, maybe a screen was cracked, maybe a keyboard needed to be repaired. And as of the 22nd, we've repaired 610 devices. I'd like to point this out because it was a few years ago, several years ago, that we actually brought hardware repair back inside. Previously, hardware repair was outsourced, and there was a lot of time being wasted preparing equipment to ship it and then receiving it. So at a very, very, very conservative estimate, this 610 pieces of equipment, we've returned to service, so back in the hands of students, back in the hands of teachers, over 1,200 days sooner. So there's a clear connection between us keeping equipment in-house and repairing it and the amount of time it takes to return it to service. Continuing on, every year I run a survey to see how we're doing. And this is pretty much the same as it's been since I started running the survey. People want us to fix things quickly. They want us to fix things accurately and right the first time. And way over there on the far right, they don't want us to explain it. They just want us to fix it quickly and correctly and move on. So that's a telling, I think a telling slide about what people's expectations are of the information systems department. This is just a snapshot of overall quality of service. And again, this is a survey I run annually. And what this reflects is of the 207 people that participated in the survey, 80% strongly agree that our quality of service is excellent. This slide is here to share with you what is our growing, probably one of our larger or growing areas of support. We presently have over 11,000 parent portal accounts. So there's 11,000 accounts in our parent portal for parents and guardians. And we take those 11,000 accounts and we populate Blackboard and Finalsite, which is our website, with those accounts. So we'll receive requests from parents like, I can't log into Blackboard, I can't log into the website, I can't log into PowerSchool. And if you were to add those together, we're now supporting over 33,000 accounts used by parents. And that is a growing area of request for support, particularly now that we started work from home. So at this point, I'm going to move on to, I'm going to transition on to the budget. So were there any questions about the snapshot of the department I can answer before I move on to the budget?
So I have a quick question.
Certainly.
In terms of the Blackboard and Finalsite, are they the same login information or are they actual different login passwords and?
That's a great question. I believe we do move their passwords over. And then we move over their email addresses or their account information. But what happens with Blackboard is they have to email in, or they have to use the email password reset to reset that. So they're not synced. I don't believe they're synced. So
it's really 33,000 separate accounts.
You could, yes, you could think of it that way. I mean, I don't want to paint the picture that we're getting calls about this every day, but it is a growing number of accounts that we are supporting. So I just want to make sure that you're aware that when we talk about the information systems department, we're not just talking about the 1,800 employees and 9,000 students. We're also talking about the 11,000 parents out there and guardians that are counting on access as well.
Great, thank you.
Ben has a question.
Yeah, thank you, Denise. I know we've talked about this maybe a year or two ago of trying to maybe move all the functionality in PowerSchool over to Blackboard or Blackboard to Power, and trying to do away with one of these. But I didn't think it worked. I think there was some PowerSchool offers some things and Blackboard offers, but is that something we're still looking at, that if either one of these products advances in the next 2 or 3 years, where, George, you would come to us or maybe even the curriculum department and say, let's move us all of this from PowerSchool to Blackboard or Blackboard. I'm assuming Final Sight's kind of a different animal, needs to be remain, but consolidation, George, is that something that's a possibility maybe?
It is. It's Power School. The company is buying up a lot of products, and one of the products that they bought up was called Schoology, and Schoology is a competitor to Blackboard. So it would be a consolidation underneath of the umbrella company, and in doing so, it would be better integration. Now, with that said, Blackboard is a learning management system, and it's as opposed to Power School, which is a student information system. So the Blackboard is very much teacher student facing. So the selection of the learning management system is in the wheelhouse of the curriculum department. My
That is
department would like
correct.
to,
We
my
we
department
were
would like
we
to-
were in the middle. We were taking a look at Schoology, and we may have mentioned it one time, Ben. That you're correct in that.
Okay, so we're looking at it, but today's not the day. Obviously, I'm not asking today be the day.
No, I mean we're now would not be the time.
No, but that's fair enough. And so maybe next year or 2 years from now, if things advance, might be the day where we say, let's make that move.
We are at the elementary, particularly the primary level, looking at some different ways because Blackboard isn't really that comfortable for the elementary. So we're beginning to look at what is it, George? Google Classroom.
yes, the elementaries are considering Google Classroom or are leaning into Google Classroom.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay, I'm happy. You've answered my questions. Thanks, guys.
Certainly. All right, I'm going to move on to the budget. So you'll recognize the donut budget. Basically what I'm going to do is for the rest of the slide deck, I'm going to hit on highlights from each of these areas in the budget donut. So we'll start off with instructional computers because that is the lion's share of the information systems department's budget. And then we'll take a look at highlights in hardware, replacement equipment, et cetera. So moving on. So the instructional computers and the one-to-one, there's a percentage breakdown of that pot of money. The high schools are usually around the same. That doesn't change very often because of we have that constant turnover of providing laptops to freshmen and new students as they come in, and then as they graduate, we either sell those laptops or we turn them into loaners for the following year. The percentages for the elementary and the middle schools and district-wide, that does change, and that's driven by simply what needs to be refreshed and what doesn't need to be refreshed. What's reached the end of its life cycle and what is not at the end of its life cycle. I included a picture there on the right of the shields. We've been printing the headbands for the face shields. I included that because it was actually the instructional 3D printers that we scooped up out of the buildings, and we're using those to print those headbands for the face shield. So I thought it was just a nice a nice thing to see how we're using that instructional technology presently to help out with the current keeping our first responders safe. Moving on, instructional computers and one-to-one still. So at the high school level, again, that number stays pretty close to the same. And then we also pay for laptop insurance, covers, copiers, just to try to show the total cost of the high schools. Now, again, at the middle school, this varies from year. So depending upon the life cycle of the devices, this coming year, we're going to be replacing, you can see, just over 350 MacBooks and 300 Chromebooks. Continuing on, at the elementary level, you can see there we're replacing MacBooks, iPads, and Chromebooks. And then we have been purchasing a reserve of laptops for students that register late in the year. So we will make our initial purchase as close to the beginning of July as possible so that we can get all that equipment in and start preparing it for the beginning of the school year. It's a pretty big job. So we've been purchasing a reserve of MacBooks for students that enroll later in the summer or the beginning of the year so that we can supply a device if necessary. And then again, you can see we're going to be replacing 53 teacher MacBooks. And again, that varies year to year depending upon where the device is in its life cycle. So moving on, staying with just working our way through that budget donut. These are some highlights from hardware and software maintenance. As an example, the Adobe Creative Cloud that the students have access to on their devices. That's the annual cost. For us to manage the large number of Apple devices that we have, you can see the cost there. As an example, we talked about PowerSchool, the student information system, and there you can see the annual cost for maintenance for that. Continuing to move on, so this year we need to replace our virtual server farm, if you will. We have a very large number of virtualized systems. So fundamentally what that means is we have a smaller amount of hardware, let's call that number 8, but on top of that 8 pieces of hardware, because of virtualization, we're running over 200 servers. So it's nice because it reduces the amount of electric needed for heating and air conditioning and running the devices, and it maximizes the hardware. We do need to replace our spam prevention appliance. I think everyone has an appreciation for that appliance. And we need to circle back and start replacing the projectors and the set-top boxes in our high schools. They have not been replaced since they've opened. So those devices are rapidly approaching 10 years of service or more. And unfortunately, it's actually software that's driving it. The software is no longer supported. So we need to, we can't upgrade those set-top boxes. So we need to refresh them. And like I said, they've been in service for 10 years. We also need to replace the video system back end. We have numerous channels that we remodulate and provide district-wide. So if in a classroom a teacher wants to watch something that's live on TV, they can through the projection system. Security. So one thing I did differently this year is I broke out security from compliance. Previously, I would have had one security and compliance slide, and we kind of lumped those budgets together. This year, I've broken those out, and it's simply to give us a better gauge of what our budget is for security versus compliance. This year, we're going to have an outsourced service. We are increasing that outsourced services, as well as there's also listed on here things that we are simply renewing. For example, our firewall maintenance is something that we're simply renewing, and our email protection is something we're renewing. So there's a mix here of new services and maintenance and renewal from previous years. Just to give you an idea of how we're using some of that security budget, if you stop and you look at these numbers, they seem extremely high, and they are. So just as an example, in the month of October, coming to our network, we had 22 million connections in the United States, and we blocked 2 million connections from the United States. So we're constantly sending this information in the way of logs to one of our outsourced companies, Presidio in this case, and they are if they see something that doesn't look right, that is suspicious, they will alert us on that. And this next slide is an example of the type of alert that we would receive. So as an example, we received an alert regarding what looked like recon or exploit activity coming from a computer based in Hungary that was trying to either reconnoiter or exploit our PowerSchool server. So our outsource will alert us to that, and we'll take the necessary action based on what type of activity it is we're seeing. So day to day, we spend time switching our hats. So we're system administrators, network administrators, database analysts, and then we get an alert and we switch our hat and we put on our security hat, and we do what is necessary to continue protecting the school district's network. Continuing to move on, this is the compliance slide. As I mentioned, I broke out compliance from security, and I think we're all familiar with the web filter. The web filter is in compliance with the Children's Internet Protection Act. We've put a lot of effort into making our websites ADA compliant, and with web technology, you'll see something called ALLI quite often, ALLI. It actually means accessibility. I threw a footnote there explaining what ALLI means. It's the 11 characters between the A and Y in the word accessibility. So it's kind of leet speech. It's that abbreviated speech we see in text messaging, but it means accessibility. And we've put a lot of effort into making our websites more ADA compliant. And in addition to that, we're also using closed captioning for our videos. So we're doing a lot to also make videos that we publish ADA compliant as well. Continuing on, telecom, internet, and fiber optic network. The fiber optic network that is throughout the district connecting, although we have 15 buildings, we have 14 sites. And it's a fiber optic network that connects all those buildings back to our data center. And it's the data center where the servers live and where the internet connection is bridged. You can see the cost of that. And then there's our internet and DDoS mitigation services and the cost for that. And then School Messenger, which I think, again, we're all familiar with those phone calls. Outsource services for this year. We've been hiring some summer supplemental staff due to the number of devices that we're trying to turn over and get ready annually. Knowledge Lake and Nintex is a product that we use for developing forms in the district and making those forms available via the web as opposed to more paper. We're trying to move away from papering and use more electronic forms. The SRST routers is it means survivability. Should that fiber optic network be damaged for some reason, we're all familiar with trees falling down in the Lower Merion. Should a tree fall down and cut through our fiber, stranding a building from the network, we have routers in each building that will stand up autonomously and permit the people in the building to continue making emergency calls on the phone system if necessary. And then we have PowerSchool outsourced services, and we also bring in consulting assistance for scheduling of school schedules in PowerSchool. New initiatives this year, we're continuing to try to increase the capacity of our internet service using actually different internet service for something that came out of the School Safety Task Force. The School Safety Task Force had a request about people being able to use their personal phones during an emergency. We are continuing to press forward with that and trying to fulfill that request. And then also we're trying to create more physical security in the buildings by putting card readers on our telecommunication closets. Training, this is just a snapshot of training. We do require a lot of training in the Information Systems Department. For example, the Education Data Summit, Blackboard Conference for maintaining and operating Blackboard as another example, Power School as another example. Continuing on, okay, so at this point I'm going to transition into the obsolescence plan. That's like our 5-year view of what equipment needs to be refreshed over a 5-year period. And many times we're talking about the network. So I always like to show this slide to try to help people understand that the network is big. It's again, keep in mind we have 15 buildings on 14 sites, all connected back via fiber optic network to a data center with a large data center with a lot of services and how that connects to the internet. So to help people understand the network, I like to share this slide. So as an example, we have those firewalls that I talked about connecting us to the internet, and then we have from there the internet is shared out through what's called the core. The core resides at the DAO, and it's how all the buildings connect back to the DAO. So if you were to trace the fiber out of the DAO to any one of our buildings, you would find yourself at what's called the distribution layer. It's the distribution layer that connects the building back to the DAO and then distributes that connection out into the building. So that's why you see the number 14 there. We have 14 locations throughout the district. And then from there, we have 71 access closets, telecommunication closets that, again, continue to spread out like a root system, the internet throughout the district. And then the last stop for many things is the wireless access points, which we have nearly 700 spread throughout the district. And then that's how those 15,000 devices connect to the network, either through the access points or through the access closets. All right. So with that, let's take a look at the 5-year obsolescence plan. I talked about the SRST routers a minute ago. That's for the consulting services to come in and help us install those. This is actually for the hardware cost. We need to replace some access layer switches in the admin building. There's 3 closets in the admin building that we need to go ahead and replace those. We have a load balancer. It's a device that helps, although Power School looks like one website, there's actually numerous computers behind Power School. And it's the load balancer that helps share that load out to all those servers so that we don't see a lot of latency or lag. We do have to replace some security cameras for the high schools and the DAO, and we need to move forward with replacing projectors and set-top boxes. In 21-22, we had to replace a storage array, network storage, boardroom AV, and projectors at LM. Continuing on, we're planning to replace the wireless network in 22-23, as well as the Bala-Cynwyd projectors. And then you can see 23-24, 24-25, access layers, data center, uninterruptible power supplies, Welsh Valley projectors, and it continues on. This is my last slide. So are there any questions about the budget for the Information Systems Department?
Let me just jump in before questions, George. I wanted to indicate that in 22-23, one of the things that we're studying is a one-to-one for middle schools also, to take advantage of the technology, but also in some ways to reduce our reliance on textbooks going back and forth with the kids.
And there's also something I failed to mention, I apologize. This does not reflect the new building. The new building equipment would be purchased using, correct me if I'm wrong, Vic, FF&E. But eventually you will see the new building appear on the obsolescence plan as that equipment reaches the end of its life cycle. So this does not reflect the new building, but it will eventually reflect the new building as that equipment reaches its end of life cycle.
Thank you, George, by the way.
Certainly.
George, I have a question. For all the existing hardware we have, the distribution, what's your sense of how the new middle school will at least impact, the servers you have at the DAO, or are you foreseeing maybe some capital expenditure to expand that to cover, another building?
Yeah, we have been trying to size the equipment, Ben. That has certainly been on our radar, and we have been trying to size the equipment with that in mind. So when we purchased the firewalls, we purchased a little bit bigger to accommodate the larger building. When we purchased the core, we purchased more ports to accommodate the new building. So my hope is that you're not going to see me coming back saying, oh, I got to replace the firewalls because we bought too small because we're putting in a new building. We have very much been trying to ensure that our purchases keep in mind that we're bringing on a new site.
Thank you, George.
Certainly.
Lucy has a question next.
Yes, I have two questions. I wanted to ask about, or just to clarify, the one-to-one insurance piece, which was, I believe it was $40,000. I just wanted to clarify that that's in addition to the part that the families pay for the high school students, correct? Like, so there's this, the families pay for a student that brings the laptop home to the high schools, and this is additional for maybe for free and reduced lunch and others. Is that correct?
Vic, you want to take that one?
Oh, hold on. Hold on, Vic. There we go.
Yeah, that is correct. So the funds that you see paid for families on free and reduced lunch, and also covers the loaner one-to-one computers that we need to give to students when their computers getting repaired.
Thank you. And then my second question is just a follow-up to what Mr. Copeland had commented about the one-to-one for the middle schools. I'm curious, first, how that would balance out the existing, or sort of the machines that are purchased for the middle schools. And then also to ask whether that would be, currently the middle schools are using more of the Chromebooks, and would that continue? And then they would switch to MacBooks in high school, or would it, or perhaps you're not that far yet. But.
Well, let me answer the second question first. The curriculum should drive the technology. So I know that there's curriculum committees forming to look at the technology, and I think you'll see that that decision come up out of those committees that are forming to identify what will be the best platform for the students. I don't. And Scott, correct me, I don't know that that decision's been made yet, but I do know that there are committees forming to start examining what is the best platform for the curriculum at the new 5 to 8 model. In terms of the first question, you're going to see, at least I envision it being more of a shift to what we see at the high schools. And obviously you're going to see students with devices in their hands. You're going to see devices that we use for loaners to provide the device to students when their device breaks. And then you'll probably continue to see more specialized equipment in areas that need it. So if a particular device is needed in an art class, or a particular device is needed in another subject area, you'll continue to see that. So in terms of the distribution of devices, I think it'll be more akin to the high school. But what those devices look like will be driven by the curriculum.
And Peter Lee has a question as well.
First, thank you. This is very detailed, and it's good to see the background behind what's driving your plan. This slide here, your 5-year obsolescence plan. What goes into determining when something needs to be replaced? How are you setting the actual schedule for that?
Certainly. So it's based a lot on risk. So as an example, you heard me talk a lot about access layer switches in the building. The access layer switch doesn't have any unique information on it. It has a configuration on it that we can copy and quickly replace and switch a piece of equipment out, but it doesn't have anything unique to it. So in that case, we'll keep that for 7 years, maybe even a little bit longer, depending upon how the budget works itself out. But most of the networking equipment, depending upon what it is, we try to stretch it out because it doesn't have unique knowledge on it or unique information or data on it. Now, things that have more unique data and information, the risk appetite isn't as much there. So we want to refresh that equipment faster so that we're ensuring that we're not losing someone's work that took a lot of time to put together and generate to ensure that it's safer. So something like a server, we're going to refresh that faster on a 4 to 5 year cycle because that has unique data, it has unique information on it. Although we are backing it up, we want to make sure that we're keeping that available and secure.
Okay, but most of this equipment has sort of industry standards for how long the usable life is and sort of replacement. We're following that. I think it would.
Yeah. We're sometimes we're behind it, but we usually, yes, we are following industry standards. I want to, again, if it has something that you have to balance the cost of if we were to lose a storage array, for example, we could potentially be losing hundreds, thousands of hours of people's work, which would be extremely expensive to refresh or to replace, because now you're talking about staffing having to recreate that. So although we're following guidelines, we're leaning a little bit more towards the let's not get risky and try to stretch this thing out to the very end. But equipment that we can, we do. We keep it in service as long as we can.
Right, but the reason those are industry standards is because you have also standards around the different layers of backups. You have long-term backups, short-term backups, and so like the notion that we want to be less risky about critical information. Like I get that, but there are different tools to manage that particular risk besides replacing equipment if there's still usable life. And I'm not questioning your decision making. I just at least it would be. I would be curious, I don't know about the other members of the committee. I would be curious about how old some of these things are and, what the
Sure.
what the standard replacement rate for those things are.
And we can tell you that. We can tell you when we purchased this equipment and how long it's been in service. We can certainly do that.
Okay, great.
Is that something you're requesting?
It sounds like you two want to have like an IT bonding situation.
George, I
Yes.
had a question. In terms of surplus equipment,
Mm-hmm.
what do we do with that when we replace like SRST routers or other things that have additional useful life?
So the first question I always ask is, can I get the manufacturer to buy it back? Can I, or can I get a price break on my next purchase? Many times the manufacturer doesn't see any resale value in it and won't take it back from us. But I do ask that question when we're making purchases like that. Depending upon the equipment, student laptops, for example, we resell on eBay. But what we try very hard to ensure that we're properly recycling equipment, that we're responsibly recycling equipment. So we have a recycling company that we use. They often will give us some value for the equipment in their recycling process, and that offsets the cost of other equipment that we're recycling. So we trade in what we can. We sell student laptops, and we try to properly recycle.
Okay, and my last question is, in terms of the COVID situation, it seems that the technology department has been working very hard, judging from the tickets. And I just wanted to ask, how have we been responding, and how do you see it going forward over the summer?
Well, we've hopefully we're responding well. Hopefully we're fixing as many things as we can. It's come with its challenges. We were not prepared for assisting people from their homes. Our entire model, our entire practice has been, bring it in, we'll take a look at it, we'll fix it, we'll get you back up and running. Now suddenly it's, okay, we're going to call you and we're going to do what we can to help you. And if we can't, we'll replace the device. So it's been a big shift. Like as something as simple as, like we've been remotely assisting people, but we didn't have a remote assistant client that would work outside of our network. So it's been a big adjustment. In terms of moving forward through the summer, I know that there's conversation about programs that normally run during the summer, and what can we do to continue running those programs, and what we can do to support those.
Let me jump in, George.
I'm sorry?
I was going to say, so Suba, May 1st, actually, will be when we begin to bring people together for the purpose of looking at two things. One, what's the summer going to look like? And secondly, what happens if, in terms of a transition back to a school-based or some hybrid program. So we wanted to wait until we thought we had some more medical advice, health advice. I'm not sure we're going to have as much as I want, but we're going to begin that discussion now. Do we collect all those things? Do we let kids hold them over for the summer, for a summer school? We're just in the beginning stages of looking at that.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions?
I do not have any other raised hands at this time.
Okay. Thank you so much, George. This was very helpful in understanding how the technology department supports our curriculum in our school.
You're very welcome. I'm gonna stop sharing here.
Is it? It's Megan's turn, isn't it?
I think I'm up.
Well, Megan, before you go, let me just speak, because this is obviously a big part of our budget, is our HR and our human capital. In prior years, certainly my last 4 years, there's been 3 areas that we've looked at in terms of staffing. First and foremost has been enrollment growth. Trying to keep up with the number of students that are coming in, that's a major driver. Megan's going to go into this obviously in detail. That includes not only numbers of teachers, but numbers of administrators, particularly at the building level, and support staff like bus drivers, custodians, and so forth. a lot enrollment driven. Another priority has been putting resources where they were needed, and this has occurred mostly at the elementary school. Instead of saying every elementary school gets X, it's, well, every elementary school gets X, but in areas where there's a shown need for staffing changes or increases, we've tried to put resources. So we may have included more remedial teachers at certain elementary schools as opposed to others, as opposed to just giving, you know, a certain set number. So that's been a priority. And the third has been expanding programs. We've added math support at both middle schools. We've added a guidance, at the guidance level, a second college access counselor, as well as trying to keep up with the number of guidance counselors. We offered, rather than administrators in the middle schools, we added middle school deans, basically, to help not just as disciplinarians, but helping students through difficult situations. We've matched the NOW program and the communications program, which was only at BC and and LM. And if a kid from Welsh Valley or Harrison wanted to go to those programs, they'd have to leave their friends or their classmates and go to those other schools. So we've matched those programs at both Welsh Valley and Harrison. We have behaviorists. Not just in the special ed, but behaviorists specifically for non-IEP students, for kids who are having behavior issues in school, working with teachers, giving them behavior plans, keeping them out of special education programs, and supporting them in their schools. And we've had academic support changes in the elementary schools. As a matter of fact, that's going to be one of the foci of the CCOB meeting for next week. In the category of expanding programs, because of the financial situation we're in, there's really none of that in this budget. The budget is really focused for staffing on basically enrollment changes and changes or staffing that's required or we feel is required by law. So I just wanted to give that preface to the situation, to say you really won't be seeing some of the program enhancement things that we've seen in the past because of the financial situation. With that, I'll turn it over to Megan.
All right. Good morning, everyone. My hope for this presentation is that I make it through and my internet stays stable, because I don't know if you all experience this, but when you have spouse and children on the internet all doing Zoom meetings at the same time, you start getting these messages that the internet becomes unstable. So Denise, I'd ask if you could text me if something happens that I get frozen on my end and I can't tell that as I'm speaking. I would appreciate that. So
Absolutely.
Thank you. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here with you. So the objective this morning for my presentation is to give you an overview of our staffing. Mr. Copeland spoke to some aspects of how we make decisions around staffing. We'll dive a little deeper into that through this presentation, as well as explain where we are with our recommended staffing, new staffing for the 2021 school year. Obviously, where we are relative to the closure, we're constantly thinking about what impact that has on all areas of our operations. Certainly staffing is one of them. There are questions about whether that means less staffing because of, we won't get the students enrolled the way the projections are leading us to believe, at least the projections that we received in December, or will we need more? Because we're going to have students that are coming back to us that have maybe not had the level of support that they would have had during a regular school year. Students that are coming to us with new and different social emotional needs that we'll want to meet and will need to meet in order for them to be successful in the classroom. So I think there are still questions out there as to how this impacts staffing as well as all of our other operations. I don't know, Mr. Copeland, if you wanted to add anything to that point, or I'll just move on.
No, you're good. Good to go.
All right. So I think it's also helpful to give an overview of the district as a service-based organization beyond what we traditionally think of school when we think of students in a classroom and a teacher in that class. Staffing for us is well beyond the classroom. And as you've heard over many presentations, we are a growing district with over 8,800 students. We like to include and think about our parents, almost 18,000, and a growing community of 60,000 plus residents as our customers, our clients, and people that we are here to serve. Services that we do provide are across multiple physical locations, including 10 school buildings, 15 buildings total, and over 250 acres of land. And not to lose sight of the fact that first and foremost, we are committed to delivering high quality educational, co-curricular, and extracurricular experiences in a safe and welcoming environment. So to highlight some of the services, again, beyond the classroom, and these are services that we've talked about in prior finance committee meetings, as well as, typically in board meetings, we talk about these types of services. But I do like to highlight some of the volume that each one of these departments is responsible for. For example, nutritional services is serving over 3,200 meals a day. Managing a free and reduced lunch program of over 1,000 students. We have clinical and counseling services that provide critical crisis intervention and mental health supports for students and families, again, beyond the classroom. Health services is a service that as a public school district we're required not only to deliver to our students in the public schools, but also to the non-public schools within our district. So beyond the 8,800 students I referenced, we are serving about 13,000 students across the district. And you can see some of the data there that I think was also highlighted for you during the student services presentation, just the volume of services that our nursing staff provides across multiple locations. Technology services, Mr. Frazier presented to you this morning the vast array of services and supports that his department provides to our students, to our families, the number of devices coupled with the number of licenses that are managed in order for us to successfully deliver instruction in school and now, importantly, when we're not in school. Facility management, again, you talked a little bit about that during Mr. Lill's presentation. I think something that is worthy of highlighting is the fact that we are managing nearly 10,000 hours of use of our facilities by community groups and other organizations. So beyond the school day and beyond what our students are using the facilities for, that's something like an average of 27 hours per day that we're managing, meaning we're opening buildings, we're unlocking gates, we're prepping the area, we're cleaning up the area, and we're otherwise making sure that area is secure and ready for those folks to use the facilities, again, beyond the school day and beyond what's used by our students. Transportation services, we've talked a lot about transportation this year. Again, like health services, this is a service that not only do we provide to our students that attend our schools, the 10 schools that we currently have. We also are transporting students to non-public schools, not only within our district boundaries, but beyond. So that's why you see a total there of 126 schools that we're servicing across the region. We're in operation what feels like every day of the school year with respect to transportation, except for unfortunately now. And we have our own fleet of vehicles that we are responsible or need to ensure that they are maintained and repaired in good working condition. Our communication services, we have a communication department led by Amy Buckman, thousands and thousands of notices, articles. I'm sorry, did someone just try to jump in? I can't. That are vetted, posted, reviewed, edited, drafted each year. One of the things that does take time, and part of the responsibility of the department, is to ensure those notices that are posted on our website are ADA compliant. That is a process that again is a little bit time consuming, but is in place to ensure that all of our community members have access to the information that we're providing to the public. So with that sort of broad explanation of the variety of services we provide, we have approximately 1,570 employees. That includes professional staff, support staff, and administrative staff. The majority of these employees are members of our Lower Merion Education Association and that collective bargaining agreement, which does drive salaries and benefits within the district, which we'll talk about in greater detail later. We do have some other employment categories that are worth noting that come with some management. Our coaches and activity sponsors. Again, back to the point that we do endeavor to offer a robust extracurricular and co-curricular program for our students. Just across the high school alone, we have approximately 118 athletic teams and 96 different clubs and activities. Many of those alone, so there's some management and certainly vetting and of those individuals as well. We have a smaller group of individuals who serve us in temporary or seasonal employment, such as summer crew. And then we have about approximately 130 per diem substitutes that are both professional and support, and that's currently something that we manage in-house. So all of those substitutes are individuals who we bring on board and ensure that they are placed on a daily basis across the district where there are needs. Independent contractors and volunteers obviously are not employees, which is why the asterisks are there, but they are individuals that come and serve and help support the work that we do. And they are individuals who, from a function of HR, are vetted from the standpoint of ensuring that they have background checks and clearances, and that they are able to serve us in our schools. So moving along to how we think about staffing and the needs of our growing enrollment. We see it as primarily a formula and need-driven review. Now, that's not exclusive. We'll talk a little bit, and actually Mr. Copeland did talk a little bit about the programmatic changes that have been made that have necessitated additional staffing. This year, you'll see later in the presentation that primarily our needs this year or recommendations this year are based on what I'm going to share with you here. So, for example, for our classroom teachers, we have class size guidelines that we follow. I'll share a slide with you, or a couple slides with you about how that looks. Special education and gifted staffing are driven by Pennsylvania Department of Education and legal requirements. I'll talk a little bit more about that. Also, the individualized education plans of students that may require things such as one-to-one support and other staffing needs. Things just a department such as our custodial maintenance department, we base needs on square footage, usage, and customary industry standards. Our drivers, the needs are based on the number of buses and routes, which are driven by enrollment primarily. Instructional and behavior aids, again, our IEPs do dictate to some degree what those needs look like in terms of staffing. And technology, our technology department, which is growing based both on enrollment and the number of devices deployed, our platforms that are utilized, and the number of end users. So we look, this is a sampling. There are more things that we look at, but from the standpoint of giving you some idea of those types of formulaic staffing drivers. This gives you a snapshot of what we're considering. Now, this is a number that a slide that you've seen before. That was part of the budget presentation that Mr. Orlando presented a few weeks ago. This reflects our growing enrollment. Certainly has been a factor in terms of our staffing over time. You can see that in that orange band, we continue to anticipate growth. This year, for example, moving into the 2021 school year, the projections were that we would increase by almost 200 students. And in terms of the breakdown of that, we have approximately 88 new students expected at Lower Merion High School alone. So we're going to talk about that a little bit later, but I wanted to give that as a highlight for you to keep in mind as we talk a little bit more about these staffing numbers. But before we get there, I wanted to give you a snapshot of what staffing might look like at an elementary level. This is a snapshot, a snippet, I should say, of a larger Excel spreadsheet that we work from annually when we look at our growth numbers across the elementary schools. What you'll see initially at the top there are the class size guidelines. So, for example, oops, I just knocked my computer. Kindergarten, the class size guideline is 20 students per class. And one strategy that we've employed as we've experienced this enrollment growth is to increase that guideline by 1. So we refer to it as N+1, meaning that we do not add a new section for kindergarten in a particular year until each section reaches 21 students. So that does make a difference. We have, one student can make the difference in terms of having to open a new section. So having a little more flexibility across the guidelines is helpful and certainly has saved us staffing costs over the years. Next, one thing we keep an eye on, and so this is an example from this year, is last year's enrollment. So this year we've been looking at where were we last year at 18-19. And we had a total of 686 students across 30 sections in Penn Valley. This year's highest projected enrollment that we were looking at as we were planning for this school year, again, this is just giving you an example of how we look at this. We were anticipating a drop actually in enrollment of approximately 7 students, and meaning that we would also see a drop of the number of sections we would need. And sometimes, and you don't always see that because sometimes depending on where those students are projected to enroll, that even a drop of enrollment may necessitate an increase in the number of sections. But in this case, we were anticipating a drop of the number of sections as well as a drop in enrollment. What actually happened, which is this middle band here, is an increase. We saw a 12 student increase in enrollment this year over what was projected going into this year. That being said, we were able to maintain the number of sections at 29. So last year we ended up reducing the number of sections at Penn Valley by 1. That happened. That gives you, sorry, the visual is a little bit late behind my talking point. One way that we were able to manage this, in addition to the N+1, is for approximately 4 years now. And what that means is that once we have established the number of sections per grade, in this case, looking at 3rd grade, you can see that there are 0 seats available. In other words, we have every section, every one of those 5 sections has 24 students. If we were to see additional students enroll, which students enroll year-round for Lower Merion schools, we would have to make a decision whether or not we would go above guidelines, which we have hesitated to do in light of the fact that we've already extended those guidelines, or the opportunity presents itself through the partner school program to assign that student to another elementary school within the district and provide transportation for that student to that other school, provided that there is space available at that school. Now, one thing that does shift, just to relating to that partner school program in terms of thinking to the future, right now we try to partner school students within the feeder pattern, meaning Penn Valley students may attend either Belmont Hills or Gladwin in these situations. However, with the new middle school coming online, anticipated in 22-23, these students would potentially be partner schooled to the partner school, feeder pattern is reduced. So for example, for Penn Valley, the school that would be its typical partner would now just be Belmont Hills, since in the new feeder pattern, those students would be attending Welsh Valley, and then Penn Wen and Gladwin will be feeders to the new middle school, and Kenwood and Marion will be feeders to Valley Kenwood. So that will be an adjustment that we will need to be working through as well. So that is a brief summary of the partner school program, and that coupled with the N+1 formula has allowed us to realize savings in terms of staffing over the years. So
Megan, can I just say that, Megan?
Oh, sure.
Yeah, let me just jump in and say that
yes,
while it's saved us finances, and that's a good thing, it also has saved us some program areas. So in the past, we might have given away, let's say, an art room, which affects, everybody in the school, as opposed to, when 1 or 2 kids move into the district. So it saved us money, but it's also saved us facility. That's it. I just wanted to throw that in.
All right, thank you. That's the other perspective, an important perspective, I think, to take when thinking about how does the school district staff its to serve its student population is to just take a look at the student population profile. So this is an example of, this is representative of the students at Penn Valley in 1819, and I use that because we have the publicly available statistics or data that I'm pulling from, but we want to keep in mind that we have among the 686 students populations of students that are receiving services that are required, that are mandated, data that's tracked by both the state and federal government based on students that fall into these categories. And this is a really sort of very rudimentary look at this, because no one clearly falls into one of those categories. We see overlaps. There are other certainly other dimensions to consider. But these are ones that, again, we are required to report on, that we are required to provide specialized services to. And so with that, it's important to get to I think share that perspective of we're not just talking about teachers in classrooms, we're talking about a delivery of services that are required. Another I think important sort of noticing is to kind of think about students that are coming to us that have other needs that aren't necessarily falling into a category that is something that we track by virtue of what's required by state or federal law. In other words, there's been studies that indicate that students, half of the students in Pennsylvania have suffered a traumatic event during their childhood, whether that be a death of a parent, a serious illness of a parent, a sibling, drug and alcohol abuse in the home, abuse in the home. You'll see that these categories don't capture those students, but we know that these students come to our schools every day and are in need of support by counselors and social workers and others because they're not getting that necessarily support in the home. And school is the place they come where they feel welcomed and their needs need to be met in order for, so beyond what we're sort of mandated to look fit into those categories that still have needs that we need to.
Okay, Megan, you're fading in and out a little bit.
Hard to meet. Yes.
Megan, yeah, you're
Okay.
fading in and out a little bit more than earlier.
Darn. Yes.
We're hearing you a little bit better.
Now. Okay.
Better.
Okay, try again now.
Better.
Yeah, that's better.
Okay. Megan,
Hear me?
now I can. Can you, I don't know what
Can you
you said.
Hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Got you.
Okay. All right, so
Why don't you go to the next,
Slide.
not sure
yeah,
what
go to the next
to
slide.
Okay.
Do the special ed staffing. And if you fall away, Kimberly,
Okay. I'll keep.
Okay.
Okay. Got it. Okay. I'll keep. Yeah. Sorry, you break. This slide represents, or not represents, is the requirements, the Pennsylvania requirements for caseload maximums. I know Ms. Frazier spoke about this during her student services presentation. This is sort of the formulas that we look at in terms of the staffing that we are recommending. One of the, I think, notable pieces here that we'll talk about later is with our artistic support staffing, as you'll see recommend later on. Those caseloads are very low. You can see 12, and we're seeing and have seen increases in that student population that we need to serve in accordance with these guidelines. So you'll see, and I think Ms. Frazier will be prepared to talk about that a little bit later in the presentation. Before I go to the next slide, how am I doing? Anyone?
It's okay. It's okay.
Okay, excellent. Right. So as I just mentioned, in terms of our growing special education population, you see the numbers for total enrollment from 2015 to 2019 and the increase year over year. Our special education enrollment has outpaced that increase, as you can see on the right side of your screen, year over year. We saw approximately 11% increase just going into this year. Similarly, just using those same numbers, but as a percentage of enrollment, so you can see our special education students represent currently this year approximately 16% of our total enrollment. So getting into the numbers, our salary and benefits, as Mr. Copeland noted at the beginning, are our budget drivers. Both salary and benefits comprise approximately 76% of our total budgeted expenditures, and our projected salary costs for 2021 and benefit costs are there at approximately 135 million and 86 million. We're going to talk about that as it compares to previous budgets in a second, but I would also want to note that this budget number also reflects new personnel that's being recommended as part of this presentation. As you can see, over the past 4 years, salaries have increased at a rate of approximately 2.5% each year, and benefits at approximately 3.4% on average. We do see an increase, obviously, on the benefits side after following a decrease in the 1920 year. That is due in large part to an increase in claims that we're seeing and are projected. And it again, as a function of an average over that period of time, it is below what I believe the national industry standard is for benefit costs over that same period of time. I'd also note that a changeover that I think matters to us with respect to how we share the cost of benefits with the association, which is, again, our largest group of employees. We moved from a share of salary to so that those increases, are subject to both an employer contribution. So moving on, in terms of our new staffing that's been proposed, as I mentioned before, and I've said a few times, it's primarily formula and need driven. Mr. Copeland spoke about some of the programmatic enhancements over time that drive some of our staffing decisions. In December, annually, we ask our departments and schools to advise us of what they anticipate their staffing needs for the following year. At the same time, we are looking at enrollment, projecting at programmatic changes. We're looking at our special ed student population and all of the things that I've already talked about. All of these requests are vetted very carefully through our directors and ultimately through Mr. Copeland. As an example, less than 40% of the staff originally requested is being proposed in this budget. So in terms of those categories of need, I would say that it's none of these squarely fit in one of these categories. For example, the compliance needs are based on what we see in terms of enrollment growth. Some of the programming is really based on enrollment growth as well. So you'll see there that on the compliance side, we have, based on caseloads, increasing a need for some additional gifted support at the elementary level, special ed and autistic support across all levels, and ELD stands for English Language Development, and we're seeing growth in that area both at the elementary and high school level. So the staffing for those positions is recommended based on what the compliance requirements are and the needs that we're seeing. Enrollment growth in that middle column, we're anticipating potential need for an additional teacher across the elementary level based on just enrollment and those formulas that I shared with you earlier. Also, a high school counselor at Lower Merion High School, as I mentioned earlier. We are anticipating a growth of almost 90 students at Lower Merion specifically, and in addition to the growth that it has already experienced to date. So that's being recommended to ensure that our caseloads are in line with what National Association recommends for caseloads. On the programming end of it, which again leads also into enrollment growth, these are categorized, and Dr. Eveslak can speak to these in much greater detail in terms of there are some shifts here that it's not necessarily a science teacher. It's part of a science teacher and part of a business teacher, because we're going to be able to make some shifts internally. And that's part of this vetting process that we go through so as to ensure that we're maximizing our current staff and minimizing the need to add new staff. And sometimes we see staff sharing across buildings. Sometimes we see staff transfers across buildings in order to ensure that we are making recommendations based on what we see as absolute necessity in terms of these additions. So I'm going to keep moving on. I know Dr. Eveslak can speak in a little greater detail to these, and so maybe at the end when we have some questions, I just want to make sure I get through this in case my internet goes down completely. So I'm almost finished with the presentation here. So on the support side, I should have highlighted if I didn't say it, that last slide was for our professional employees. On the support side, we look at our needs sort of similarly in terms of compliance, instructional aids. While we can't predict exactly how many we need, we typically have seen an average of a need of 3 instructional aids year over year based on the growth of our special education population, as well as what needs are required, again, by individualized education plans. Enrollment growth is driving additional requests in terms of operations. We're projecting a need for an additional not half a custodian, obviously we don't have half a custodian, but to increase a current custodian's staffing level to full-time in order to address the current increased usage at the administration building, in particular by our students that utilize the building, as well as just the overall increased usage of the administrative offices. Transportation and technology, both while we have experienced significant growth over the last 4 years, I think we've added, between 400 and 500 students. These departments have not added to their sort of supportive positions, and we're seeing a need at this point to do so. In particular, in transportation, we are recommending additional secretarial support. We have a number of contracted vehicles in addition to our own that have compliance standards, that have DOT requirements that we're expected to meet together with our contractors. We have, just additional routes to manage and maintain clients in terms of customer students and families that need support. So it's recommended that the transportation department increase their secretarial support by an additional staff member. Technology, again, like transportation, has not added to their staff in several years. And as Mr. Frazier explained, the increases in enrollment obviously drive the increases in the number of devices, but so does the way in which we program for students and the licensing and platforms that we use in order to support instructional delivery. Not to mention the platforms that we use to do our business operations, to support our transportation and routing department, to support health services. So going back to all of the different services we provide, all of those have different electronic platforms, and our technology department supports all of those things as well. So there are two different requests, not different, but two requests here, recommendations here to add. One is to help manage all of the licensing. That would be our information technology support technician. So once we have all of the accounts, which are tens and thousands of accounts for students and families and employees, we need, we've identified that there's a gap in how we manage those. And it's currently inconsistent at best, I would say. And we are in sort of need of someone that can be the point person and direct traffic as it relates to all of the licensing and platform and uploads that we do daily. It seems like daily, again, to support all of those operations that we've talked about. The information technology, I'm sorry, did someone jump in? Okay. So the information technology security specialist is connected to an audit that was performed around our technology security. In sort of in a nutshell, and Mr. Fraser can probably speak to this later if you have some additional questions about this, is someone that has their eyes on all of the security layers that we have in place. And it was deemed sort of an essential function by this audit, so that we could ensure not only do we have these platforms in place, but we have the capability to monitor those platforms in an effective way that will ensure that not only are these things functioning in the background, but that we can take action when there is an issue that is spotted and needs resolution. So again, Mr. Fraser can give you some additional details about that at the end of this presentation. Something that, just to wrap up this piece about staffing, since we're talking about staffing, our human resources department, function like many across industries. They are responsible for recruiting, hiring, onboarding. We do compliance, investigations, benefit management, payroll processing. I think I highlighted earlier substitute coordination. That's something our HR department does, as well as background screening and other reporting obligations. Hiring for us occurs year round. We had approximately 7,500 applications in 2019. And each position that we offer is posted on our website. We attend many recruitment fairs. We have a rigorous process for hiring. All staff members are subject to multiple levels of interview, or potential staff members, I should say. And teachers, for example, not only go through an online screening and interviews, they are expected to engage in demonstration lessons, writing samples, etc. Now, obviously, we're in a different world right now, so we're working through how that we'll be doing all of this virtually. But for the most part, all of the recommended candidates meet with HR, meet with the assistant superintendent or superintendent, depending on the job responsibilities. And we ensure that all of our staff are reference checked, background checked, and other job requirements are met. Then all, just for the, I guess, benefit of the public, all employees that we've spoke about are board approved. And then we engage in onboarding through HR and the relevant departments. One thing, as I mentioned, moving sort of more into a virtual platform for interviewing and identifying candidates moving forward. We, have it's enhanced our website presence. One thing we're very committed to is working closely with the Achievement Imperative Task Force. You can see we're committed as a district to ensuring that our students see their identity represented in our teaching staff, and so it's something we're very committed to. We engage in and attend numerous, when we can, when we're not closed, recruitment fairs focused on increasing our diversity in our workplace. And I think we are committed to continuing to do this, and I look forward to taking any questions that you have around staffing.
Thank you, Megan. Are there any questions?
Oh, wait, here we go. Ben Driscoll.
Uh-huh.
Go ahead, Ben.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. I think my question is, given how hard it is to gauge future enrollment growth, I'm going to assume it's a little harder now. We've almost lost 6 weeks of, so, I mean, how easily will you be able to adjust staffing needs? Because my guess is the administration is going to learn about enrollment growth later this year than you might have otherwise anticipated, given what's happened the last 6 weeks. So what can you say about that?
Well, yes, I think it's still going to be a challenge for us, and we're working sort of in the realm of the unknown. We are continuing with registration, however. So we've been able to transition our registration process to an online platform. So we have, currently just at the elementary level, over 500 students enrolled at the K-1 level. So they are still coming. It is slightly less than what we would have normally at this time in the year, but we are still seeing, our numbers are growing, and we're seeing registrations come through. So I think it's still a little too early to know what the impact's going to be, and whether we're going to see more students coming from independent and private schools over to us. So, I mean, we could exceed that number for those reasons.
One of the things that we've done the last few years, though, Ben, is I've approved a hiring process beginning earlier in the spring, and that's given us a pretty good head start. But, there are things that happen over the summer. People, will go on maternity leave, or somebody else gets it, or somebody who was a long-term sub gets a permanent job and they leave. And so we have had to do late summer hiring in the past. We try and avoid that at all costs. And we are, I'm kind of happy that the numbers have slowed now, because I do anticipate growth in the fall, or if not this fall, the following fall.
Great. Thank you.
Our next question is from Peter. Go ahead, Peter.
Thank you, Megan. That was really informative. I just have one clarifying question. The slide that showed the breakdown of salary increases versus benefit increases, the salaries was like 2.6%, I think it was. That includes new staff and increases and column changes? That total salary? That's an
Yes.
all-in number?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you.
And next we have Lucy.
Hi, this is a similar question to Ben's, or a follow-up, and less about new students coming in, but I'm curious or wondering about if we still have some level of restrictions in the fall in terms of social distancing. And I know that we don't know yet what that will look like, but what is the opportunity, or, to make budget changes come August if we find out that we need to only have 12 students in a classroom at a time? Or one example that my sister's dealing with is they can only have 12 students and a teacher, but that teacher can only stay with those 12 students. So if they have a class of 24, they need to find an additional teacher to deal with that. And I'm just curious how that process, what it would look like.
Well, we're kind of curious too.
Yeah.
We've talked briefly. We're gonna get really granular May 1st and beyond in terms of. So let me step back. One of the things we're watching is the rollout. We're still in red. What happens when you're in green? What happens, yellow, whatever, and what parameters the state will place on us. Will we be allowed to have a 50% ADM, average daily membership, you know, the attendance, so that you can go every other day? Because we simply wouldn't have the space. The space in school is a problem. Transportation is even a bigger problem. How spaced out would the students have to be if we're going to continue with social distancing within a school? And so we're working.
Great.
Okay, we have a comment from Cheryl Masterman, who says, I know parents of private schools that are waiting to hear how their school will handle the fall situation before they decide to enroll within the district.
Yeah, I think I only know one independent school head, and he's, you know, clearly worried about what will take place. I spoke with him, I guess, probably 2 or 3 weeks ago, and and at that time he only had one person who said, "I want my money back," but they're anticipating that may increase. And so, unlike other financial situations, this one didn't ease in with an ease out. It came more as a crash, and so we really don't know what people are going to do next fall.
I do not have any more questions on the board here.
Okay. Thank you so much, Megan, for the presentation. Just 2 points of clarification. We had a meeting last week from special education, or covering special education, gifted and support services. And I wanted to find out that number is included, or the personnel number is included in the total personnel that you gave, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, the numbers that I captured here.
For the whole district.
Correct, which
Okay.
would be inclusive, I believe, of what Ms. Frazier presented on in her presentation.
I just wanted to make sure that everyone understood, or people watching this after understand that this kind of is we're capturing departments, but it may be included elsewhere. Okay.
Right, all employees that have been mentioned in other presentations are captured here. This is sort of the overview. This is pulling all of those recommendations together.
Got it. Thank you. And if no one has any other questions, I wanted to mention that we have one more meeting that we will record as well. May 13th meeting for curriculum and instruction. And that concludes our meeting today. Thank you for joining us.